What's going on, everybody? Top 10 Pokemon back, and I am bringing you yet another fantastic Pokemon card auction recap. Folks, you're going to really love today's video. Not only will we be talking about Pokemon, but we also have some Yu-Gi-Oh! Auctions and also some crazy Magic auctions that came through in this month's PWCC Premier Auction. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned to the very end. We also saw some, pre-release Scarlet and Violet cards come by. As usual, a ton more Black Label cards came by as well. So there is something for everyone in this video. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, lowpopping.market. For those of you who don't know, lowpopping.market is an Instagram page of high-end card dealers that buy all graded cards and sealed product. Folks, when I say they have a tremendous lineup of cards available, I am not joking. There are some absolute grails on this page. If you are a PSA, BGS, CGC, or even a sealed product collector, you must go check out this page. Now, what is really awesome about this market page is that they offer trades on all of their items. So in the event that you see a particular card that you really want, but you don't have the cash on hand, you can trade for it. They also offer multiple payment methods and international shipping. Many of the items available are also competitively priced, and you don't have to worry about getting scammed with any counterfeit product. As I've said before, folks, Low Popping is a very reputable member of the Pokemon card community. I can vouch for them. I've done business many times before and have had nothing but positive experiences. So as soon as you're done watching this video, head over to Instagram and go follow lowpopping.market. The link will be in the description below as well. All right, folks. Let's jump into this auction recap. I have a lot of stuff to go over, as usual. Let's start with some pre-release Scarlet and Violet cards that came by. Here we have a sealed staff promo Quaquaval. I think I got that right. Quaquaval? It sounds right. This is a pack of 4 that sold for $152. And then we saw 2 of these Gardevoir EX cards. One sold for $102, while the other one sold for $112. So, not exactly sure who got their hands on these or the ethics behind it, but there you go. Up next, from the Japanese Scarlet and Violet that came out, we have a BGS 10 Miriam card. Hitting some massive numbers yet again this week. This one here sold for $1,885. Up next, a couple of CGC Perfect cards. Here is an amazing rare Kyogre from Shining Fates. Got the perfect example and sold for an even $100, while this perfect Shining Magikarp from the Celebrations Classic Collection sold for $330 this week. We saw numerous Black Label cards. Let's go over them. Here is a Japanese Scarlet and Violet Drowsy. Let's take a minute and appreciate this artwork because it is pretty stellar. I am really feeling this card. This one here sold as a BGS 10 Black Label for $345. Here we saw a Japanese Giratina V-Star. Also got the Black Label and sold for $305. Here is a Black Label Deoxys VMAX from the V-Star universe, sold for $410, while this Black Label Diancie sold for $310. We saw more V-Star universe cards. Here's a Galarian Zapdos that sold for $306. Here we saw a Black Label Absol that sold for $395. Here is a Black Label Japanese Raikou V that sold for $535. Here is a Riolu that sold for $565. And then we saw this Black Label Charizard V-Star that sold for $710. Up next is a Japanese Mewtwo V-Star that sold for $720. Then here is a Japanese Palkia V-Star that sold for $585. And then again for $640. And then we saw a Japanese Black Label Dialga V-Star that sold for $1,575. And then we saw several of the Black Label Japanese 25th anniversary cards come through. Here is a Mew EX that sold for $580. The Shining Magikarp here sold for $898. Here is a Black Label Venusaur that sold for $685. Dark Gyarados sold for $660. Up next is this English Flying Pikachu that sold for $475. And then here we saw another CGC 10 Pristine Gold Medal Charizard from the Ultra Premium Collection box, sold this week for $3,625. So this CGC graded Charizard is still holding its value. We will keep an eye on it for weeks to come. Here, I covered this in my previous video, but if you didn't see it, it was a BGS 10 Black Label Charizard GX from Hidden Fates that sold this past week for $5,150. We saw a Black Label Gyarados VMAX Rainbow Rare from Evolving Skies that sold for $1,025. And then, check this out, folks, we saw a PSA 10 Sylveon VMAX sold this week for $223, but a Black Label did come through and it sold for 2,600 big ones this week. And then lastly, for our modern cards, at least on eBay, we saw this CGC 10 Perfect Japanese Promo Champions Festival card that sold for $7,900. All right, let's jump into the vintage portion of this video, and let's keep an eye on the titles because they are particularly hilarious. Here we have a Shadowless Alakazam from base set, which was labeled Extremely Tough, sold for $4,219. And then we saw two Shadowless Magnetons. One sold for $810, the other one $787. We saw a Shadowless Poliwrath that sold for $1,125, and then two Shadowless Venusaurs. One of them sold for $2,344, the other one sold for $2,550. And look at the title. Extremely Tough. What is that supposed to mean? Does that mean it's like a tough grade? Because as of right now, this card is a Pop 98. I mean, I can think of numerous cards from the WotC era that are much more difficult to grade than this. I don't know. These extra tidbits they put in the titles just crack me up. Here we saw from Jungle Set a first edition Flareon Holo that sold for $1,900. This first edition Vileplume that sold for $830. And then we saw a few notable cards from Fossil. Here is a Holo Zapdos, sold for $735. The Kabutops sold for $675. And the Moltres sold for $825. We had a couple of awesome cards from Team Rocket come through. Here is yet another holographic Rainbow Energy in first edition that sold for $936. We saw two first edition Dark Raichus come by. One sold for $1,125. The other one, $1,463. And then perhaps my favorite Dragonite card of all time, the Dark Dragonite first edition that sold for $2,375. Here we have a magnificent Blaine's Moltres, looking beautiful as always. This card sold as a PSA 10 for $3,850 this week. We saw several unlimited WotC Holos come by. Here's a very off-scanned Togetic Unlimited PSA 10 from Neo Genesis, sold for $395. And then we saw pretty much all the Shining cards come through. Here's a Shining Noctowl, sold for $530. The Shining Kabutops sold for $570. Steelix here sold for $645. The Shining Raichu, $898. Shining Mewtwo sold for $1,400, while the Shining Celebi sold for $551. Here's a Shining Tyranitar that sold for $1,500, and the Shining Charizard from Neo Destiny sold for an even $4,000. And then we saw both of the Shining cards from the Revelation set. The Shining Gyarados sold for $2,113, while the Shining Magikarp knocked it out of the park, selling for $4,550. Here we saw, I think, five Holo Black Star Promo Mews that were all graded CGC 10 pristines, and all five of them sold for $1,000 a piece, which is very interesting because last week a BGS 10 copy of this card came by that wasn't Black Label, just a BGS 10 pristine, and it sold for like $2,500. So possible flippy there, maybe send them off to BGS. I don't know. Here are two of the Topps Chrome Sparkle cards. This is a Kingdra that sold for $621, while this Squirtle sold for $2,238. From EX Unseen Forces, we saw an Espeon EX graded as CGC 10 that sold for $3,600, while this here Umbreon Prime from Undaunted sold for $1,800. I stumbled across a couple of interesting lots. This is a complete unlimited base set lot, all graded PSA 9, even comes with a nice little case here that sold for a grand total of $5,201. And then this was on Heritage Auctions. It is all of the first edition non-holo base set cards. I'm not exactly sure the condition, but all non-holo cards, rares, commons, uncommons, sold for a grand total of $2,437.50. Then I stumbled across this little number. I used to do these funny and ridiculous eBay listing videos. This would probably be a part of them if I still did them. But it is a Mew Oreo. We've seen these come by a million times. You know, Mew Oreo cookies that are super rare. This one is preserved in resin and sold for $5,000. It didn't actually sell, but that was pretty funny that they're putting these cookies in resin now. So, trying to preserve them, fossilize these Mew cookies. All right, on to this week's PWCC weekly auction recap. We saw a PSA 9 Gold Star Torchic that sold for $2,340. Here is a 2010 World's Championship promo card, the Tropical Tidal Wave card that sold for $1,950 as a PSA 10. Up next, we saw a CGC 10 Unlimited base set Blastoise that sold for $3,360. And then, this is pretty interesting, last week we saw this Heracross, first edition Heracross from Neo Genesis sell as a PSA 10 for over $5,000 or something like that. This week, a CGC 10 copy came by and sold for $3,480. Here we saw a first edition base set Blastoise in PSA 9 that sold for $3,960. And then we saw a CGC 9.5 first edition Venusaur from base set that sold for $4,080. Here we saw from EX Deoxys, a Deoxys EX that sold as a PSA 10 for $4,200. Here is a Japanese, I might leave that in there. Here is a Japanese Crystal Lugia that sold for $4,920. And then we saw this 1997 Charizard Japanese Prism card that also sold for $4,920. Here is a Japanese first edition Charizard from Plasma Gale that sold as a PSA 10 for $5,160. And then we saw this unlimited base set Charizard, got the Gem Mint 10. It has Arita's signature on the case, so not on the card itself, which probably would have caused it to go for more, but it sold this week for $8,400. Here we have the Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard, all signed by Mitsuhiro Arita, all authenticated by PSA, sold for a grand total of $14,400. Up next was this first edition German base set Charizard that sold for $20,400. Here we saw a first edition base set Blastoise in PSA 10 that sold for $26,400. And then here we saw a 2005 Summer Battle Road Victory Orb trophy card that sold for $30,600 as a Gem Mint 10. And then here we saw a CGC 9.5 first edition base set Zard that sold for $32,400. Now that was it for the Pokemon card auctions, folks, but if you are a Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic enthusiast, stay tuned. We have a couple of very interesting auctions to go over there. Here is a Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon first edition registry lot. So all of the cards from this set, all graded PSA 10, sold for $69,000, and that includes the first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon card. So that seems like a pretty good deal to have that entire set graded PSA 10. What do you think? And then we saw a slew of high-end Magic cards come by. Here is a 1993 Beta Black Lotus signed by Christopher Rush. It was authenticated and sold for $30,000. Here we saw a PSA 10 Mox Pearl that sold for $34,800. Up next is a PSA 10 Mox Emerald that sold for $37,200. Here is an Ancestral Recall in PSA 10 that sold for $37,200. We saw a Mox Ruby come by in PSA 10 that sold for $39,600. And then we saw a PSA 9 Beta Black Lotus card that sold for even $60,000. Here is a BGS 8.5 Alpha Black Lotus that sold for $108,000. And then the Holy Grail of Magic, the PSA 10 Alpha Black Lotus. The case was signed by Christopher Rush, so not the card itself, but the case. This is a pop 1 of 6 card that sold for $540,000. So I'm pretty ignorant, folks. I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty ignorant to the Magic market in terms of these graded cards. I mean, these Power 9 cards don't hardly ever come by, so it's really hard for me to gauge a price. But what do you think, folks? I think these are crazy prices for these Magic cards. I mean, of course, $540,000 is quite a sum to spend, but I don't know. Any Magic fans out there, let me know what you thought of these auctions. I'm curious to hear from you. That concludes our auction recap, folks. Thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to check out lowpopping.market on Instagram. That's all I got for you, folks. Thanks again. I will see you in my next one.